Good morning. It's great to be with you today and to talk about my favorite subject, and that's agriculture and the constant change that's evolved in agriculture in my lifetime and really the lifetime of the world. And as I thought about that this morning eating breakfast, agriculture is something that touches every American every day. And it's something that's critically important to what we need to survive. And as I think about that, and I think about the constant change that's evolved in agriculture, clearly it's been one of the challenges, it's been the opportunity for the world. And that change was necessary as we went from X number of people in the world to line of sight on 10 billion people in this world by 2050. So as I thought about today and thought about how do we walk through that and talk about the opportunity to continue doing in a more sustainable way agriculture, I thought about three things. One, where have we come from, where are we today, and where are we going? And how do we look over the horizon at what can be rather than what is today? And so I thought about my family and my family farm growing up on a 300-acre farm. And when my father left for World War II, they were farming with horses. When he came back, they didn't farm with horses. They had a John Deere B tractor with a 4-row planter. Today, we farm that farm with a high-speed John Deere 90-foot planter. The old planter that he farmed with for decades would plant 25 acres a day. The new planter plants 75 acres an hour or 1,000 acres a day. And the tradition in agriculture that's really been important for the world is how do we produce more with less, the very definition of sustainability. And today we define that as how do we lower the carbon score and improve the environment by making every acre more productive. And so as we think about that, it wasn't just the planter and the innovation and the science and technology that went into that to improve productivity. It was also what went into that planter and into the ground and the seed. And in terms of the seed genetics and what's happened to improve yields on every acre. So if we think about in the 1950s and 60s when he was using that John Deere B 4-row planter, yields in the US were about 50 bushel an acre. Today, they're 250 bushel an acre because of the investment in seed technology, back to how do we produce more with less on that acre of arable ground when over time, as population has increased, we have fewer acres per capita population. So it's really necessary that we increase production so we have enough food for the world. And what's resulted in all that is today, instead of 2,000 calories per person in the world, we have 3,000 calories. And because of that improvement, we've been able to do other things with crops, like create renewable energy and biofuels from that crop, in addition to feeding the world's population. But it wasn't just corn production, grain production, soybean production that increased and the investment in agriculture. It was across the board. And it included protein. It included beef, pork, and chicken. And the genetic investment in breeding better animals, in nutritionally how we feed them better, and having an environment we place them in so that they could be more efficient, has resulted, on the slide you see today, instead of 4 pounds of grain to produce a pound of protein, it takes 2.5. Instead of 10 pounds on beef cattle, it takes 6. Instead of 3 on chicken, it takes 1.5, which has allowed the beef cattle herd, for instance, in the United States, to be the same size as it was in the 1950s, but produce 70% more beef with that same number of animals for the world demanding more protein. So that opportunity continues to happen, and it's back to agriculture has always embraced how do we produce more with less, the definition of sustainability. And so as we talk about carbon, lowering carbon scores, for us in agriculture, it hasn't been just a pitch. It's been reality. So as we produce more crops, we were able to create biofuels out of that kernel of corn rather than just feed animals and protein because of the surplus that we had. And so when the ethanol industry started it had a carbon intensity score of about a 99. So the improvements in agriculture, improvements in the technology of the plant, lowered that in half. Took about 20 years to do that, but cut it in half. So as technology continues to come about, and the question being, how do we lower the carbon intensity score to improve the environment? Well, today, the plants emit CO2 into the atmosphere as part of fermentation to create the alcohol that becomes ethanol. And what we know we can do is we can take and we can capture that CO2, we can compress it, we can put it in a pipe, we can ship it to geology, and North Dakota has done a terrific job of studying the geology to be able to safely store that permanently and improve the environment, cut in half the carbon intensity score of that ethanol plant and that biofuel by the single stroke of doing that. And then if we overlay the opportunity of what's happening and continuing to happen in the rest of agriculture, and investment in science, technology, innovation to improve yields, and also beyond that, we can take other emitters. We can take nitrogen plants and capture their CO2 that lowers the carbon intensity level of that nitrogen that goes on every acre in the upper Midwest, that lowers the carbon score on the corn produced. It goes to the ethanol plants that have the opportunity to have a net zero carbon fuel within a decade. And again, if you think about that, net zero carbon liquid fuel. And without the impact to society of changing the electric grid, of the higher carbon scores of electricity and electric vehicles, but we can do that through agriculture. We can do that the same way we've done it, always done it, is embracing science, technology, producing more with less, and today we call that lowering the carbon intensity score. The other area that just struck me a few years ago, you had Unilever in Europe announce that every one of their 75,000 products was going to have a carbon intensity score on it going forward. So if you think about food products have a nutritional score, I would suggest to you as consumers, we will be seeing in the near future every product we buy having a carbon intensity score. And agriculture has a great opportunity with the software systems that exist today to figure out how we capture carbon in the soil, how we change farming practices to lower the carbon footprint across the board. And farmers will be incentivized to do that by the suppliers they work with to create a cleaner, better environment, lowering the carbon score, lowering the amount of energy it takes to feed and fuel the world every day. So as I think about that opportunity, and I think about the past, the present, and the future, I can't help but be inspired by that opportunity and by the acceptance in the communities of how do we accept change, how do we make our life a better life, and how do we look over the horizon to see what can be rather than what exists today. And that's what's going to happen if we embrace sustainability. It's good for the environment, and also we can do that and create healthy food and energy for the world going forward. So thank you for having me here today. I appreciate being here. Thank you.